All right, welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a look at, well, some pretty dense notes, actually. Lesson 7 notes is what you sent us.
That's right. Yeah, lots to unpack here.
But hey, that's what deep dives are for, right?
Yeah.
We take all this complicated stuff and try to make sense of it. And today, it's all about organizational security, resilience, and continuity.
Mm.
Keeping your data safe, your systems running, and planning for when things go wrong, which, let's face it, they inevitably do.
Yeah, in today's world, this stuff is so important. It doesn't matter if you're a tech whiz or just someone who uses a computer, these concepts are relevant to pretty much everybody.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump right in. One of the first things that caught my eye in these notes is the importance of having a policy for getting rid of old software. That stuff that's just sitting there gathering dust, probably not even being used anymore.
Right, it's easy to forget about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Outdated software, the kind that doesn't get those regular security updates and patches, is a major security risk. Like, you're basically leaving a door wide open for hackers.
It's kind of like, having a house with a broken lock. You might think it's fine because you have an alarm system, but why take the chance? Especially when it's such an easy fix.
And what's even more interesting is that your notes point out that even software that's not directly connected to your network can still be a way in for attackers if it gets compromised.
Yeah,
It's like if someone breaks into that shed in your backyard, they could use the tools in there to get into your house.
good point.
So yeah, the key takeaway here is to be proactive about software disposal and patching vulnerabilities. It's not just about cleaning up your hard drive, it's about seriously reducing your risk.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of being proactive, another big theme in your notes is asset identification and management. Basically, knowing exactly what you have and making sure it's secure.
Right, taking inventory. That makes a lot of sense. So what exactly does that entail? I mean, is it just like listing all your computers and servers?
It's definitely more than that. It's also about knowing where your data is stored, who has access to it, and ensuring it's protected through regular audits and data classification. Like figuring out which data needs to be under lock and key and which stuff is maybe less sensitive.
I see. So kind of like organizing your files and putting the really important ones in a safe.
Exactly. And it's important to understand what asset management doesn't directly involve too. For example, while segmenting your network is great for overall security, it doesn't replace the need to know what is on those
So
segments.
that's like, yeah, building those walls in your house. But you still need to know what furniture is in each room, who has the keys and all that.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've talked about keeping track of our stuff, but how do we actually control who gets access to it? And that brings us to the, I guess you could say, ever-present topic of passwords. Your notes make a big point about the difference between storing passwords in plain text, which is basically a huge no-no, and encrypting them. Why is that so important?
Well, think of it this way. Storing passwords in plain text, even on a secure server, is like leaving your front door unlocked even though you have a security system. If someone gets in, they have immediate access to everything.
Oh, I see. So it's about making it way harder for attackers, even if they manage to get past other security measures.
Exactly. Encrypting those passwords using a process called hashing adds another layer of protection. So even if someone steals the data, the actual passwords are scrambled and essentially useless without the right decryption key.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that honestly can keep me up at night. What happens when things go wrong? And I'm not just talking about a computer crash, but like major disruptions. Your notes dive into organizational resilience and recovery capabilities. What does that really mean?
It's really all about an organization's ability to bounce back from anything that comes its way, whether it's a cyber attack, a natural disaster, or even just, a power outage.
Yeah, being prepared for anything.
Right. And your notes list some pretty specific measures to build that resilience. For example, setting up a redundant data center is like having a spare tire for your car. If one goes flat, you can just swap it out and keep going.
That's a good analogy. So you're saying if your main data center goes down, the Reikinote one can kick in and keep things running smoothly.
Yeah. Minimal downtime, minimal disruption. Another key measure your notes highlight is having a detailed and tested incident response plan. That's basically your playbook for when things hit the fan. It outlines exactly what to do, who's responsible, and how to get back on track as quickly as possible.
I guess the testing part is really important there. Makes sense, like you don't want to be figuring things out during an actual emergency.
Exactly. You want to know that your plan works and that everyone knows their role.
Right, right. The notes also talk about the importance of a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. I always thought those were just for home computers, but it sounds like they're pretty important for organizations too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In a data center, a UPS is essential. When the power goes out, it provides that immediate temporary power to either allow for a graceful shutdown of systems or to keep things running until the backup generator kicks in.
So it's like a bridge between the power going out and the generator getting up to speed.
Yeah, exactly. It buys you precious time and prevents data loss.
And speaking of backups, your notes also mention things like redundant power supply units for servers and redundant data storage.
Hmm.
It's all about having backups for your backups, right?
Exactly. Redundancy is key for resilience. With redundant power supplies, if one fails, the other takes over seamlessly. And with redundant data storage, you're protected even if a whole storage system goes down. Your data is mirrored and ready to take over.
Wow, so it's like no matter what happens, you've got a plan B and even a plan C.
Pretty much. And then, on top of all that, regularly testing and updating your data backup and recovery solutions is crucial. It's like making sure those life rafts on a ship are actually inflated and ready to go.
Right, it's not enough to just have them. You have to make sure they'll actually work when you need them.
Exactly.
Okay, now for something that's really interesting, your notes clearly state what doesn't directly impact resilience and recovery. Things like hiring more developers, beefing up your firewalls, or just buying more servers without addressing power redundancy.
Yeah, those things are all important for security, but they're not the things that help you bounce back after an incident.
Got it. So it's like building a stronger wall is great, but you also need an escape route in case the enemy gets over it.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay, let's drill down a bit more on power. You mentioned UPSs and backup generators, but your notes also talk about this layered approach to power resilience. What does that really mean?
So like we discussed, the UPS is that first line of defense, that immediate response to a power outage. It's there to provide a short-term power bridge until the backup generator kicks in.
Okay, so the generator is the long-term solution. Makes sense. What about those power distribution units, the PDUs, and things like power filtering and monitoring? Where do those fit in?
So PDUs are mainly about distributing and balancing power, making sure everything gets the juice it needs. And power filtering and monitoring are more about protecting your equipment from surges and fluctuations and ensuring things are running efficiently. They're important, but not the core of your power resilience strategy. That's the UPS and the generator.
Got it. So those are more like the support team, making sure the main players can do their job.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, moving on to, I guess you could say, the bigger picture. Your notes introduce two concepts that sound very similar: continuity of operations, or COOP, and business continuity planning, or BCP. Help me out here. What's the difference?
So COOP is really about maintaining your critical operations during a disruption. It's focused on the immediate actions you need to take to keep those essential functions going with as little downtime as possible. BCP, on the other hand, is about maintaining essential business functions in the face of any challenge, and that includes the recovery process after a disruption.
So COOP is keeping the lights on, and BCP is getting back to business as usual.
That's a pretty good way to put it, yeah.
Okay, so COOP is more about the immediate response, and BCP is the long game.
Exactly. And your notes clarify some key points here. COOP isn't just about data protection or network monitoring or even power backups, though those things can be involved. It's really about keeping those core operations going, whatever they may be.
And BCP isn't solely focused on things like secure connections, detecting unauthorized access, or encrypting data.
Right? It might involve those things, but its core is about getting the whole business back on track. It takes a broader perspective, looking at things like communication plans, alternate work sites, and even supply chain management.
So they both address various threats, but COOP is about the immediate keep things running actions, and BCP is about the bigger picture of recovery and getting back to normal.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense now. Let's move on to something that can really bring an organization to its knees: not being able to handle demand. Your notes talk about capacity planning, and it sounds like it's more than just having enough storage space.
Yeah, it's definitely a bigger issue than that. It's about making sure your systems can handle the load, the traffic, the users, everything without crashing or slowing down. Because if you can't handle the demand, it can lead to service disruptions, outages, you name it, and that can be really damaging for any organization.
Yeah, you don't want your website crashing during a big sale. or your network going down when everyone's trying to work.
Exactly. So capacity planning is all about scalability and performance, making sure you have enough resources to meet current and future demands.
And that includes things like processing power, bandwidth, storage, all of that, right?
Yeah, all the building blocks you need to keep things running smoothly.
Okay, now let's talk about how all these different security measures actually work together. Your notes mention the concept of defense in depth, or layered security controls. What does that mean exactly?
It's basically the idea that you don't rely on a single point of security. Instead, you build multiple layers of protection so that if one layer fails, the others are still there to catch the attack.
Oh, I get it. So it's like having a fence around your house and then an alarm system and then maybe even a guard dog.
Exactly. The more layers you have, the harder it is for an attacker to get through. And that's really the point, to make it as difficult as possible for them to succeed.
Your notes also talk about why certain practices are counterproductive, like just focusing on one super strong layer of security or even distributing your security resources without a clear strategy.
Yeah, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. And you need to focus your efforts where they'll be most effective.
Okay, so layer security is about having a well-rounded approach. That makes sense. Now, let's talk about authentication and authorization. Your notes mention multi-factor authentication, or MFA, and role-based access control, or RBAC. What are those all about?
Well, MFA is all about adding an extra layer of security to your logins. Instead of just using a password which can be stolen or guessed, MFA requires you to prove your identity in multiple ways, like you might need your password and then a code sent to your phone, or you might need to use a fingerprint scanner.
Oh yeah, I use that for my banking app.
Right, exactly. And then RBAC is all about making sure people only have access to the information and systems they need for their job. So instead of giving everyone access to everything, you assign roles and permissions based on what people actually need to do.
So it's about limiting access to reduce the risk of unauthorized access or misuse.
Exactly. And your notes also highlight the dangers of shared passwords, which is a really bad practice. If multiple people are using the same password, it's impossible to know who's doing what and if the password gets compromised, well, everyone's account is at risk.
Yikes. So definitely avoid shared passwords. Got it. Now, last but not least, let's talk about physical security. Your notes cover a lot of ground here, from cameras to security guards to sensors.
Yeah, physical security is just as important as digital security. It doesn't matter how secure your systems are if someone can just walk in and steal your equipment or access your data physically.
So what are some key takeaways here?
Well, strategically placed cameras are crucial for monitoring critical areas, deterring intruders, and providing evidence if something does happen. And having security guards who are well-trained and regularly rotated helps to prevent complacency and ensure that they're always vigilant.
That makes sense. The notes also talk about the importance of motion sensors and alarm systems, as well as glass break sensors. What's the idea behind those?
Well, motion sensors are great for detecting unauthorized movement, so they can trigger an alarm if someone's where they shouldn't be. And glass break sensors can detect if someone's trying to break in through a window, again, triggering an alarm and alerting security. It's all about having multiple layers of detection to catch an intruder as early as possible.
Got it. And I'm guessing it's not a good idea to only have your alarms active during business hours.
Definitely not. You want your security systems active 24/7, especially when no one's around.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Finally, let's touch on network and endpoint security. Your notes explain how network gateways act as that first line of defense, kind of like the gatekeeper to your digital world.
Yeah, the network gateway is essential for evaluating all the incoming traffic and blocking anything that looks suspicious. It's your first line of defense against malware, hackers, and other threats.
And then you have biometric locks, which use things like fingerprints or facial recognition to control physical access, right?
Exactly. Biometrics are becoming increasingly common because they offer a much higher level of security than traditional keys or passwords.
I guess it's pretty hard to fake a fingerprint or an iris scan.
Much harder than stealing a key or guessing a password, that's for sure.
The notes also stress that security should always take priority over things like promotional activities at network gateways, and that those old-school padlocks just aren't going to cut it for a tech company.
Right, a network gateway's primary function is security, not marketing. And when it comes to physical security, you need robust solutions that are designed to deter and delay intruders. A simple padlock just won't do the trick in today's world.
And one last point, your notes mention that using multiple antivirus solutions at the same time can actually be counterproductive.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, but running multiple antivirus programs can actually create conflicts and open up security holes. It's best to stick with one well-configured and up-to-date antivirus solution.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here, from getting rid of old software to building resilient systems to implementing layered security and everything in between. It's clear that organizational security is a complex and multifaceted issue. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that security is an ongoing process, not a one-time fix. It requires vigilance, awareness, and a willingness to adapt to the ever-changing threat landscape.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Huh.
And on that note, considering all the different layers of security and resilience we've discussed, what do you think is the single most often overlooked element in an organization's overall security posture? It's a question worth pondering as you continue to explore this vital topic. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Thank you.